Is it a person? Well, I can't even do that.
Education here at the Holocaust Museum and Learning Center. I'm very happy to welcome such a large crowd to this program. Obviously, the focus of this evening's presentation is of interest to a great many people. This event is also a great lead-in to the Holocaust Museum and Learning Center's 20th anniversary in 2015, which will culminate with a gala dinner on August 9th in 2015. Next year will mark 20 years that the HMLC has been fulfilling its mission to remember the Holocaust and honor the survivors in our community. I should also say that this program attracted a lot of people, a lot of faces we don't ordinarily see here. So for that reason, the program will be followed by questions and answers, which will be followed by a reception. But the Holocaust Museum is open. So if anyone would like to go down and visit the Holocaust Museum this evening, it will be open. Tonight's program has been generously supported by Dr. Arthur Gale and his family, some of whom have come here from both coasts, and we're very happy to welcome them, in loving memory of his wife, Marilyn Gale. And I would like to call on Dr. Gale to say a few words.
My family and I are honored and privileged to be able to sponsor tonight's lecture by Dr. Susan Zuccotti on the Holocaust, the Vatican, and the Jews. This will be the first in what I hope will be an annual Holocaust lecture. I just want to make a couple of brief comments. First, while most historical events recede in time, interest in the Holocaust has increased over the years. I was surprised to learn that the recent Pew Research Foundation survey found that when respondents across all age groups were asked what it means to be Jewish, the #1 response was remembering the Holocaust. It was more important than religion, and it was more important than community. This was especially so among the millennial generation, those born after 1980. My second comment is that Hitler often boasted that the Third Reich would last 1,000 years. We all know it lasted only 12 years. But in a way, Hitler's Third Reich will last 1,000 years. In fact, it will last until the end of time. The unspeakable atrocities perpetrated by the Nazis against innocent people will be remembered by institutions like the St. Louis Holocaust Museum, the U.S. Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., and Holocaust museums throughout the world. The program tonight is one more contribution to keeping that memory alive. Thank you.
Now it's my privilege to introduce our speaker. Susan Zuccotti received her PhD in Modern European History from Columbia University. Her recent biography of a French Capuchin priest who, working closely with Jewish friends and associates, rescued thousands of Jews in Marseille and Rome during the Holocaust, is titled Père Marie Benoit and Jewish Rescue. Published in 2013, it has already received numerous awards. While Dr. Zuccotti's honors and publications are too numerous to mention now, some germane to this evening's program are The Italians and the Holocaust, Persecution, Rescue, and Survival, published in 1987, and her 2000 publication, Under His Very Windows, The Vatican and the Holocaust in Italy, received the National Jewish Book Award for Jewish-Christian Relations and the Sybil Halpern Milton Prize of the German Studies Association. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Susan Zuccotti.
Thank you very much, Dan. I would like to begin by expressing my great appreciation to Dr. Gale for making this lecture possible. To Dr. Gale and his family, whom I met this evening for the first time, have graciously supported this lecture, and I am very grateful. I would also like to thank the Holocaust Museum and Learning Center for the organization, for the facility, for facilitating this lecture, and I am grateful to them, and particularly to Dan Reich, who has escorted me through this day. I'm delighted to be here, and I thank you all for coming. It's quite a daunting audience, a lot of people, and it's a little intimidating, but it's also very gratifying to have so many people in an audience, and I thank you. This is a complicated story. I will try to express it and teach it and describe it with all of its nuances, but it is very complex as well. So I hope you will chalk up questions in your mind and remember those questions and ask them. I find often the exchange of question and answer is the best part of an evening like this, because it helps me to get at what you are interested in. It helps me to clarify points that perhaps I didn't describe as well as I might have. And I think it's very good for all of us in many different ways. So remember your questions. As you undoubtedly know, the history of the Vatican and the Holocaust really involves two popes. The first was Pope Pius XI from 1922 to 1939. Less is remembered or known about him, but he was extremely important, as you can see from the dates. You can't see from the dates, sorry. As you can see from his dates. He became Pope in the same year that Mussolini became the chief of Italy, 1922. The two of them served in their respective positions for many years and came to dislike each other by the end of it. The history of Pius XI is probably more than I'm going to be able to get into tonight, but it is a fascinating story which I will at least touch upon. The second Pope of the history of the Vatican and the Holocaust, of course, is Pope Pius XII, better known to you, better known to most, who became Pope when Pius XI died in very early 1939 and was Pope all during the war years. I will describe both of these popes, but far, far more detail about Pius XII. Now I'm going to go back to Pius XI. Pius XI is remembered for the fact that he initially, in 1922, 23, and until 1929, sought an accommodation with Mussolini. He thought Mussolini was a man, a state leader with whom he could work. The two had certain objectives in common. It's a complicated story, but Pius XI is remembered for other things as well. He is remembered for the Concordat signed by the Vatican with the Germans in 1933. Scholars look at his responses to things like Mussolini's invasion of Abyssinians in 1935 Italian involvement in the Spanish Civil War in 1936, and Mussolini's gradual drift toward Hitler, which greatly displeased Pius XI. Pius XI liked Mussolini and hoped to get things from him, but he was quite distrustful of Hitler, and he did not like the growing accommodation between Hitler and Mussolini. Pius XI is most relevant to our story today, however, because we all want to know what were his responses to the anti-Jewish laws which were decreed in Italy in 1938. This, in my mind, was a very, very crucial time. Pius XI had lived with and been aware of the growing persecution of the Jews in Germany and done nothing nothing publicly to oppose it. And when the anti-Jewish laws were decreed in Italy in 1938, again, he did not do very much publicly to protest against these laws. I should add that the Italian racial laws were vicious. They were very similar to the Nuremberg laws, and they were enforced. It was not child's play to be Jewish in Italy in 1938. It was not pleasant. And the Vatican failed in it's an opportunity, in my mind, to speak out at a time of persecution which did not yet involve a war. I'm going to say a lot to you about the silence of Pius XII, but remember that Pius XII and the Holocaust occurred during a time of war when speaking out had many more ramifications. It was difficult, as I will explain to you. But in 1938, could the Pope have given some kinds of guidelines, at least to Catholic Europe, about what their position should be on Italian racism and, by extension, German racism? Pius XI did not protest the Italian racial laws in any meaningful way. He did, however, ask a small group of priests to prepare an encyclical protesting racism and anti-Semitism, but that encyclical was never issued. He died in early 1939 with the encyclical against racism still on his night table. He made some speeches at the time that the racial laws were being prepared, in which he spoke about 4 times against growing exaggerated nationalism in Germany, and once or twice he mentioned a Catholic disapproval of racism. But he never mentioned Jews, he did not mention anti-Semitism, and he did not mention the ongoing persecutions. He did not use his office as a teaching instrument, a way to reach people and remind people of ethical values. In a way that he should have. On one occasion, to be absolutely fair to him, he did make a speech in which he said anti-Semitism was unacceptable to Catholics. But this was a private speech in a private place, which was never reproduced or printed in the Vatican newspaper Osservatore Romano. That speech was given in 1938. At the time, these laws were being decreed, but Vatican Osservatore Romano did not carry the speech, the one speech condemning anti-Semitism. Why not? I think this is one of the first indications we have of a growing disagreement within the Vatican on what to do about anti-Semitism and anti-Judaism. We have to remember that popes are kings in a way. They are the rulers of small, independent, neutral countries, as well as being the religious leaders that we, of course, know that they are. So that he had a staff of advisors. There was a Vatican Secretary of State. There were advisors and administrators and bureaucrats, most of whom were priests, who were putting their own pressure on Pius the 11th and Pius the 12th later, and pushing them in the ways that they thought were the best for these leaders to go. So there was a lot going on behind the scenes. In any case, Pius XI died, as I said, early in 1939, and Pius XII, who had been his Secretary of State, was elected to become the new Pope. Now, I like to start my description of Pius XII by asking the question, what might the Pope have done about the growing anti-Semitism and Judaism, the growing anti-Judaism, the growing persecution that was occurring in Europe? He could first have issued public protests against the racial laws that I have described to you. That, I think, was a real possibility because the war had not begun. He could have issued public protests against the Holocaust itself. That I will discuss when I get now directly to Pius XII, and I will discuss that first. He could have helped Jewish refugees to find a place to immigrate, helped Jews who were in internment camps, whether in Italy or elsewhere, made diplomatic interventions for Jews with the Germans, urging them to treat the Jews better, and he could have assisted rescue efforts. I'm going to discuss all of these possible avenues in which the Pope and his assistants could have gone. I will discuss them with various degrees of detail because there is not time to give you as many details as we might like. Let's talk about the Pope's so-called silence with regard to the Holocaust. The Pope was the leader of the Catholic world in Europe, in the Western Hemisphere, and throughout the world. All of us would have liked to have seen a strong condemnation of the ongoing persecution. As I said, I would have liked to have seen it at the time of the anti-Jewish laws, both in Germany and in Italy, and it did not come. But of course, there was a greater need for speaking out during the actual years of the persecution. I cannot tell you that Pius XII was totally silent. I cannot and will not tell you that he was Hitler's Pope. It was not that simple. He did make speeches about alluding to the ongoing horrors and persecutions that he clearly knew about. There was great hope at Christmas time of 1942 that he would speak out. At this point, Roosevelt and Churchill and other Allied leaders had gotten together to sign a public protest reminding Germans that there would be retribution after the war for the horrors that they knew were going on. It didn't spell out what Auschwitz was. It didn't spell out the gas chambers and the massacres, but it did speak of persecution, of immense disapproval, and of retribution after the war, reckoning after the war. Pius XII refused to sign or be a party to that kind of statement on the grounds that the Vatican was a neutral, impartial country, independent, and would remain neutral and not take sides in this conflict. But there were great hopes that Pius XII would make a Christmas message in 1942 alluding to the death and destruction, the ongoing murder of Jews. This is the only sentence in his very long speech, Christmas message of 1942, which made any reference at all to the destruction. And you can read here what he said. He did not mention Jews, he did not mention anti-Semitism, he did not mention racism, but he referred to his own compassion for the victims of war in general. He, even before December of 1942, his first encyclical also reminded Catholics that as Catholics they had a mission and a responsibility to show compassion and mercy for the victims of war. This was, he felt, what he could do, should do, needed to do to speak out. He spoke out in this way about 4 other times, again referring to the need for compassion and mercy in general. Now, we have 2 questions. The first question is why he did not take a stronger stand. And that would take me a very long time to explain, and I think this will probably come up in the question and answer period, but very generally and briefly. He was afraid that confrontation with Hitler would, first of all, make things worse for German Catholics in Germany. 2, turn German Catholics against the Vatican if they were forced to choose. Remember that Germany was at war at this time. He did not want to take on the responsibility of weakening the German war effort in the face of the Bolshevik menace and danger. This was not, of course, the case yet in '39,